Hi, in this video we're going to cover receiving and processing webhook requests. A webhook, remember, is a message that is sent from one app to another app whenever an event occurs. In our case, we want to receive an HTTP request from GitHub whenever an issue is created or updated, or whenever a comment has been added to the issue. To handle webhooks, let's start by creating a new flow for our integration. We'll call this flow something like handle GitHub events. And for triggers, I'm going to search for the GitHub trigger. The GitHub trigger takes a single input webhook secret, which is going to be a secret string that you determine. This can be a static string, or you can source it from a data source if you want to generate dynamic, complex strings. Totally up to you. I'm going to go ahead and just use a static string for the time being for the purposes of demonstration. Once I have my flow all ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and look into the test configuration drawer. And my test instance has a webhook URL, which can receive webhook requests. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that URL. And then for the time being, I'm going to manually configure a webhook in GitHub. Although in the next video, we're going to look at how to automate that process so that when a customer configures our GitHub integration, webhooks are automatically configured for them. But for the time being, for manually creating these, I can go into my repository's webhook settings, and I can go ahead and add a webhook. For payload URL, I'm going to paste the URL that I got from my test instances triggers URL. I'm going to instruct GitHub to send me JSON data. I'm going to go ahead and punch in that super secret string that I'd created earlier. And then I don't want to be alerted for every single event that can possibly occur on this repository. I'm really only interested in issues and comments on those issues. So I'm going to select individual events and specifically say, hey GitHub, please notify me when issue-related events or issue comments are created, updated, or deleted. And I'm not interested when this repository gets new Git pushes. So I'm going to go ahead and add this webhook to my repository. And then on the right-hand side, under test runs, I'll see that I almost immediately received a webhook request from GitHub, which started an execution. Refreshing my screen on the left-hand side, I can see that GitHub acknowledges that it sent a webhook request and the last delivery was successful. And looking at the payload that they sent, if I look at my trigger and look at, let's say, the headers that were a part of that webhook request, I can see that X GitHub event was ping. In other words, GitHub was just sending me a ping message to verify that my URL was indeed a properly formatted URL that is capable of receiving requests. So now I want to test and see what happens if I create a new issue. What happens in my flow? So I'm going to go ahead and open the Issues tab, and I'm going to create a new issue and call it something like, I'm having troubles. And we'll say something like, I tried foo, but I got bar instead. Clicking on Create New Issue and then going back into our test runner drawer, we see that we have a flow that almost immediately is running, syncing data from GitHub, at least to our flow so far. And if we look at the headers that we received this time, rather than a ping event, we received an issues event. Scrolling down a little farther in the payload that we received, if we look at the body of the request that we received, here's a bunch of metadata about the issue that was created. I see that the issue was opened. Under the Issues object, I can see some URLs for the issue, as well as the ID and number of the issue. This happens to be issue number 3 in my repository, so there's that number right there. Here's the title that I created, I'm having troubles. And I'm sure somewhere is a body. Yeah, I tried foo, but got bar instead. So at this point, we've received two different types of webhooks from GitHub. We received a ping, and we also received uh, um, an issue creation event. So we're going to need to be able to handle both of those things. If I go ahead and add a branching step, that'll help me branch based on if I received an issues request or a ping request. So I'm going to create a branch on value step. I'm going to have that step reference the triggers headers x GitHub event, which had the value of issues. And I'm going to say that one of these, this one branch is going to be called, issue. This is an issue related thing that happened. So it'll go down this branch if the value of this header is the word issues. Otherwise, it'll go down the right-hand side. So for our pings or for anything else we might receive that we don't handle yet, we'll go down the other side. And I'm going to say if we get any of those things, let's just immediately stop our execution. We don't want to go any further. So we received an issue. We want to create a ticket for that, presumably. I imagine because we created because we got a issue created, we're also going to want to handle like issue updated, issue closed. I'm sure there are several other issue states. So I might go ahead and create another branch step. This time, I'm going to go ahead and branch. I'm going to name my branches to disambiguate them. Type of event. And this is, I'm going to call this type of issue event. And I'm going to say that I'm going to reference the triggers, body, data, the action that occurred. I'm going to say my branch is called issue opened. If the issue had an opened action, then it's going to follow this branch. Otherwise, it's going to follow this else branch. Again, we're not going to handle issue updates or deletes quite yet. So I'm going to go ahead and just say stop execution if we get to that point. But an issue opened. Now, I want to take that payload that we got from GitHub and I want to map it on over to a Zendesk ticket so that I can create a corresponding ticket based off this GitHub issue. So I'm going to reach for the Zendesk component now, specifically the create ticket action. For requester name, I'm going to go ahead and reference the payload that we received from the trigger. And let's see what would be good to say for the requester name. I see that there's a sender object with the login name of the user. So I'm going to select that. I do want you to notice that GitHub happens to not send email addresses of users who create issues, which seems like the right thing to do. It's a security thing. And so for requester email, I'm going to go ahead and just type in a static email. I'm going to say something like no reply at example.com. This could be some email that you have. Zendesk requires an email. GitHub doesn't give you one. You're going to go ahead and just need to have some kind of bunk email address that is associated with the user who created the Zendesk ticket. But scrolling on down for the other things that we should add to a ticket subject, we can go ahead and reference as the body data issue title of the issue. We'll probably want to include a comment body. Now we could just include I tried foo but got bar instead, but it sure would be nice if we had a little additional metadata about the GitHub issue in the body of our Zendesk ticket. So for that, I might go ahead and reach for a text manipulation action. Particularly, I might want to go ahead and just join a series of lines. So I could say something like created in GitHub, maybe. I might want to have a link to the issue within these Zendesk tickets. So I might have a template that says something like issue URL, and I could reference one of the URLs that Zendesk sent to us, or that GitHub sent to us, excuse me. I could maybe have a blank line, and then finally I could go ahead and paste in the body of the issue that was created. There we go. So by doing all that, combining all of those things together, we should wind up with a nice body that we can paste into Zendesk. So returning to Zendesk, for the ticket comment body, I'm going to go ahead and just reference this join lines action. And maybe I'll name this something a little more descriptive, like generate Zendesk ticket body. The last thing that we're going to require for this integration here is some way to map that this GitHub issue corresponds to this Zendesk ticket. And for a lot of applications, you use something called an external ID. Zendesk tickets can have an external ID, and that's an identifier to say that this Zendesk ticket really corresponds to this GitHub issue. So I'm going to go ahead and use some nomenclature that I'm going to invent. I'm going to have something like GH8 say that this is the GitHub 8th issue. To combine those two values together, I'm going to reach for another text manipulation action and combine the two strings GH and the number of the issue. Let's see, body data issue, the number of the issue, and I'm going to join those with a dash character. But for my Zendesk external ID, I'm going to go ahead and just reference that join actions results, and maybe I'll rename that to something a little more clever, like generate external ID. So at this point, when I receive an issue type thing, and it was a created or opened action, we're going to go and create a Zendesk ticket body, an external ID, and we're going to create a ticket in Zendesk. Right now, I just have a dummy ticket called test ticket. Let's see what happens if I throw that same payload that I got from GitHub through my flow again. Now, a little trick of the trade here. I don't need to go back into GitHub and create a new issue to make this webhook fire again. I can simply feed the same webhook request that I received previously back through my flow once more by clicking this replay button. I'm going to run that button once more. My flow is going to execute with that same payload. We can see that it followed this left-hand side. It generated a ticket body for me. It generated a ticket ID. And supposedly it created a Zendesk ticket as well. So let's look in Zendesk here. We'll refresh the page. And now we have a Zendesk ticket called I'm Having Troubles. I see it was created in Zendesk. Here's the issue URL that I can click on to see the issue. And then I also have the body. So at this point, I've built a semblance of the beginning of an integration. The remainder of my building of this integration is going to be a lot of rinse and repeat. For example, I'm going to want to handle the case where an issue was updated rather than created, and then do something in Zendesk to update an issue. I'm probably going to want to handle comments coming in. So that's not something I'm going to build in this video for brevity, but if you pop into our docs, you can see a fully functional integration that handles all of those types of events from GitHub, where you can create issues, close issues, update issues, handle comments that were added to issues, etc. So check out our docs, go ahead and import this integration and examine how all of those different cases were handled. And then in the other direction, we handle very similar cases when when someone creates a comment or adds a comment to an issue in Zendesk, then you can go ahead and similarly create a issue comment on GitHub. So in the next video, we're going to look at how to create those webhooks programmatically. We created it very manually this time around, but that's obviously not something your customers are going to want to do. So check out the next video for creating those in an automated fashion.